So we had our first Beaver sleepover last month. I joined Scouts Canada recently as a Beaver leader, and there we were, a group of adults and 20 kids aged 5 to 7, many of them who had never been away from home before. There was excitement, and races, and games, and pizza, and popcorn, and a movie, and finally, bedtime. We sent home a list of what to bring, which included a stuffed animal or a blankie, some sort of comfort item from home to help ease the transition. But as bedtime drew nearer, a look of fear passed over those little 5-year-old faces. I had made an announcement earlier that I was a pretty good mom, according to my kids, and so if anybody was missing their mommy through the night, they could come to me and I would give them some mommy snuggles. I snuggled up with almost half the kids there through the night. The blankie wasn't enough. They needed a person. People matter more than things. People matter more than things. And when you hear that, it feels true. Of course people matter. But walk through a mall on a Wednesday after school, and you'll see people who don't even see each other at all. All they notice is the things. You'll see new moms checking their phones while their babies yearn for that loving eye contact that helps with optimal brain development. You'll see teenagers sitting side by side texting other people and only stopping long enough to snap a selfie. You'll see customer service representatives who have become accustomed to being invisible to the people they serve. There are people all around us, and yet we've forgotten that people matter. Today we're going to ask 3 questions. First, why do people matter? Second, why do things seem to matter so much? And finally, what can we do differently so that people actually do matter more than things? So let's begin with the first question. Why do people matter? Well, people just matter. But why do they matter? Why do we think that? Some would say we're socialized to believe that people matter, but I would take a more basic approach, because at the end of the day, we are mammals. We have actually evolved to care for each other. And not only are we mammals, we are social mammals. So for hundreds and thousands of years, we have depended on delicate social alliances. And not only do we look after ourselves, we looked after the young of our group. From the moment a baby elephant is born, for example, the herd will work to protect it. The same is true for hundreds of other species of mammal, and the same is true for us. People matter. But why is it that we think people matter? Think about that for a minute. We're social mammals, but how are we living? How are you living? Why do people matter to you? Where is that 5-year-old in you that needs the blankie more than the person? And you've got it kind of backwards. You know, I read that book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, and I realized we have it kind of backwards in our culture. So why do people matter? Why do they matter to you? I can tell you why I think they matter. Because we're mammals. Because we've evolved that way. Let's move to the next question, which is a little trickier. Actually, before we do that, I want to tell you a little bit about connection. You know, there's this comedian, Sebastian Maniscalco, who talks about how it used to be in the good old days. We just talked about the good old days. Maybe we won't go that far back. If we think about how to answer that question about why people matter, we actually have to look at how did our ancestors answer that question? because it's not a new question. If we go back 2 or 3 generations ago, or even just 20 to 30 years ago, Sebastian Maniscalco, this stand-up comedian, does a hilarious bit. And he says, back in the day, remember what it was like when we were all sitting around on a Thursday evening and the doorbell would ring? We'd all jump up from the TV and rush up to the door, kids sliding up in their socks. Who could it be? We'd open the door, company. Somebody who was just in the neighborhood and decided to pop by. We'd go to the kitchen table and Mom would take out the tea and the special Sabzaali cake reserved only for guests. And we'd eat and we'd talk and we'd drink a cup of tea. And children in those days sat at the table and watched adults interact in healthy and happy ways. Back in those days, when the phone rang in the middle of dinner, we'd let it ring, because the most important people were those sitting right in front of us. We acknowledged each other, we connected with each other, and we still actually yearn for that connection. In 2013, there was a report by CNN in which they found that people were visiting Facebook an average of about 14 times a day for about 2 to 3 minutes at a time. In 2016, the New York Times did an article in which they found that time spent on Instagram and Facebook combined was an average of about 55 minutes. So that's about an hour a day we spend checking in on each other, letting people know what we're doing, seeing what they're doing, just kind of popping into cyberspace to have a cup of tea. But what's different with this cup of tea is that there's no physical person in front of us. And so the social, emotional, and even physical health benefits of face-to-face contact are lost. And we're having that cup of tea with dozens of different people at the same time, and only for 2 to 3 minutes at a time. What happens is we end up actually bonding more with our phone than with each other. And you know it's true. Let's do a little thought experiment. Look at the person on your left. Okay? So what if I were to tell you that this person in a few minutes would be leaving and you wouldn't see them again for about a week? How would that make you feel? Well, if you knew them, right, you'd probably acknowledge them, say goodbye, and then meet up with them again in a week. Now, part 2. What if I were to tell you that the TEDx team will be coming through the audience and taking each and every cell phone, including yours, and you'd get it back in a week? How would that make you feel? We're all checking our phones. They didn't take it. Yeah, it makes us a little uncomfortable. We know people matter, and yet we've bonded more to things than each other. So that moves us to the next question, which is, why do things seem to matter so much? Dr. Gabor Mate, who's an expert in the field of addictions, talks about how we do indeed live in a materialistic society. We value those who can consume and those who can produce. And when you stop being able to produce and consume, you actually lose value in our culture. Success is directly linked to financial stability, being able to buy what you want when you want. Success is linked to consumption. Paying attention to things, according to Dr. Mate, keeps the feelings at bay. If we can work and shop and eat and drink and work out every once in a while, go on holidays every so often, well, then we don't have to actually face the demons that lurk inside. If we can stay busy and occupy our time with buying the next new toy or interesting experience, well, then we don't have to face those deep existential questions that bubble up from the inside. If we can stay consuming, we don't need to face our truths at all, much less grow through them. I see this in my practice as a psychotherapist all the time. Most of my clients are people who are generally successful in the worldly sense. They have it all. Many of them come from immigrant parents. Their parents left everything behind for stability and safety of their children. But now, with the degrees and the houses and the careers and the families, they're feeling an emptiness. Their parents had something that these adult children have lost: a connected community. Why do things matter so much? Because when you are poor, when you have come from somewhere else, everything you buy means a sacrifice of something else. Do we buy new shoes for the kids or a new winter coat for the dad? Do we spend money on this school field trip or save it for later when we might run out of gas? Every decision is difficult, and so some of those kids grow up and decide that they never want to be poor. And so they aren't. But in that hunt for economic gain, many of us forgot what really mattered. And what really matters to us as mammals, which is our social capital, our connected community. This moves us actually to our third question, which is, what do we do differently? What do we do differently so that people actually do matter more than things? Simply put, invest in relationships. It's so simple. My husband and I ran a couples workshop last month, and there weren't that many people there. And when we'd invite people to join us, to register, they'd get all shifty-eyed and uncomfortable, and they'd say, "Oh, well, our marriage is fine, we don't really need that. Like, isn't that just for people with problems?" And there's the fundamental disconnect. We don't actually value investment in relationships. What? People come to couples counseling when it's already too late. But tools and techniques for a happier, healthier marriage, we don't need those. But we don't behave that way when it comes to our things. We get our oil changes and our filter changes and our car washes. We maintain our vehicles. And yet somehow we don't prioritize maintenance in the most meaningful relationships of our lives. And the place I see this most consistently is in parenting. Parents have a tough time of it in our culture because we know it takes a village, and yet sometimes we don't know where that village is. We are shy to engage with other people's children, and we are shy to ask for help. We are told here in the West that if we can't do it all, there's something wrong with us. But today, I'm calling bullshit. Because we are social mammals. We were meant to ask for help. We were meant to come forward and help each other. Parents, know this. If you ask for help, you'll probably get it. Maybe not from the people you were hoping to get it from, but keep asking. Because all it takes, parents, is for somebody calm in the household to pick up your baby every time she's in distress, for her to form the appropriate neural connections for optimal growth, to feel a sense of belonging. Our ancestors didn't leave children in a room alone to cry. Our ancestors didn't leave children to raise each other. Grandparents, all it takes is for you to love those little buggers no matter what. For them to know that they are okay even when they fail, for them to build that resilience. Aunts, uncles, we need you to engage with the little ones early so that by the time they're teenagers, they have someone else in the family who they can talk to besides their peers. Siblings, cousins, friends, you matter. No matter what your own childhood was like, these little ones are looking up to you, to what does it mean to belong in your family. There's an experiment from the 70s called the still face experiment, in which a mother interacts with her child naturally, normally, her little baby, and then suddenly, with no warning, stops responding with facial expressions, gestures, and sounds. And the findings are exquisite. In less than 3 minutes, the baby goes through an entire range of emotion to get the mom to re-engage. And when the mom does not re-engage, the baby simply melts down. The brain and the body of the child cannot cope with being tuned out by her mom. This experiment has been replicated with fathers, with teachers, and with other caregivers. Now, this baby, and not just this baby, all of us when we were babies, and all of the babies to come after us, need us to see them, need us to acknowledge them, need us to mirror with them. Think about for a moment what your face looks like when you're on your phone. So what about everyone else, those who don't have children, or those who have grown children? Same thing. Invest in relationships. We've always lived in a multi-generational society. We've lived around people of all ages, always, throughout human history. But suddenly, we have seniors' residences where our elders are locked away. We have college campuses and university campuses for the young people. We have downtown hubs with young professionals. We have suburbia for the families. We're all split up. Invest in people of all ages, and especially those who are not naturally valued by our society. Who do we value? And who don't we value? Have you invested in a teenager? What about someone your parents' age or your grandparents' age? What about investing in a kid that's not related to you? These relationships matter, because what we're doing when we build these relationships is that we're building that fabric that creates the blanket of social connection that we're all craving. And connecting to each other is bigger than consumption. We can't just throw money at a person. Well, you can if you want to throw some this way. Investing in people means we have to give of our time, our attention, our compassion. The medieval poet from Persia, Sadi, wrote, "Children of Adam, created from the self-same clay, are members of one body. When one member suffers, all members suffer likewise. O thou who art indifferent to the suffering of the fellow, thou art unworthy to be called a man." Connecting to each other deeply, meaningfully, means we will see the pain. It grows our humanity, it grows our compassion, but we will see the suffering, and that's not always comfortable. The Canadian Mental Health Association tells us that 2 out of 3 people who live with a mental illness will suffer in silence for fear of the rejection that comes from stigma. And yet we know that for depression and anxiety, a strong and connected social support system is what helps people cope. For those recovering from serious addiction, meaningful belonging in community is what helps enhance and maintain sobriety. So here are all these people who could really benefit from us, from this community. And they're just withering away alone. How can we allow that? It's unacceptable. Invest in people, and especially those who are not traditionally invested in by our Western culture, the elders, the children, those without homes, and those addicted to substances. Today we've asked 3 questions. First, why do people matter? Second, why do things seem to matter so much? And finally, what can we do differently so that people actually do matter more than things? We are made from the same clay. We're members of one body. When one of us suffers, we're all going to feel it if we're paying attention and not on our phones. And those little 5-year-olds that need their mommies, they still live inside of us, needing people more than things, needing snuggles more than a blankie. Let's pop in on each other more face to face and have a tea and a laugh, because people matter more than things. Thank you.